Prime Minister, welcome to the programme. Can I first get your reaction to our colleague's report about what's happening in Gaza and the apparent shoot-to-kill process that's going on by the IDF against people trying to get food? Have you raised objections? Have you talked to the Israeli government? What is your reaction?
Well, our reaction is outraged. We are very outraged about what's going on. Our people deserve dignity, deserve to live normally, deserve to get food, to get water, to live normally. And I think these actions are not going to help anyone in this region. We therefore have been talking to everyone around the world, including the United States, Europe, Arab partners and brothers. But clearly, the Israeli government has still to deliver on this. We believe that wars will not bring peace to this region. And these actions will only bring hatred and anger to this region. Displacement, starvation, annexation, and occupation are a recipe for disaster. We need the world to look at this very seriously this time. This is not going to be good for anybody whatsoever, including the Israeli side. This is way too far. Way too far.
Mr. Prime Minister, let me also ask you about starvation. First and foremost, the UN's World Food Programme, headed by Cindy McCain, the widow of the former US Senator, the late US Senator John McCain, says the hunger crisis in Gaza has reached, quote, new and astonishing levels of desperation, with a third of the population not eating for multiple days in a row. You are not in Gaza. You have been essentially, from what I gather, and you can explain, barred by the Israeli government from taking any sort of day after or governance position there. What are you hearing about how ordinary civilians, ordinary individuals, men, women and children are faring in the ability to stave off hunger?
Well, why we are not obviously in Gaza today, but we have workers, we have employees, and we of course have partners in Gaza. They're doing their best under the very difficult circumstances being created by the Israeli army. This morning, earlier today, I had a good meeting with a lot of representatives from international partners, and we've talked to our partners and our employees in Gaza about the situation. Things are extremely difficult. Action is needed, especially in terms of opening the border crossings. This is the first thing needs to be done so that aid can come in as soon as possible. There's a lot of aid waiting at the gates. Gates are closed by the Israeli government. This got to change. This is the first priority. Now, talking about governance, obviously, what the Israelis say is their business. But the whole international community is united on the day after. The day after is Gaza, West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are parts of the state of Palestine. And only the legitimate government of Palestine will be responsible for governing Gaza as well as the West Bank. We will be working together with the international community so that we can make this possible. We will work with international partners, especially international NGOs and United Nations agencies on the humanitarian side of things. We will work with Egypt, Jordan, the international community on stabilizing force for the region, for Gaza and beyond in the day after. We will work with our international partners on governance and how we can reintegrate the institutions of Gaza with the West Bank, and also already working in preparation for Gaza Reconstruction Conference with Egypt and the United Nations so that we can rebuild Gaza on the day after.
Okay.
So we have the plan, we have the partners. All we are looking for is the end of the Israeli occupation of Gaza as soon as possible.
I'm going to get more detail about that, but first I want you to react because you've said a whole load of things there that require, buy-in from the Israeli government as well, and there is none. They don't even deal with you, with the Palestinian Authority. I'll get to that in a moment, but their official spokespeople basically say there is no starvation, no hunger crisis. In other words, nothing that they're created. They blame the UN for not distributing the food. Here's what the spokesman has just said.
In Gaza today, there is no famine caused by Israel. There is, however, a man-made shortage engineered by Hamas. This idea of famine and starvation has been thrown at us consistently on a weekly basis for the last 2 years now. It has never come to pass. So these are false warnings which come from these aid organizations.
So, I mean, there you have a particular set of facts believed by one side and a set of facts that are occurring on the ground. How do you even, get beyond that for basic humanitarian assistance? As you know, as we all know, even in war, there are rules, and stopping and besieging civilian populations and forbidding aid from going in is against international law. But if the government is officially denying that there's even a problem that they could alleviate, I mean, what's the next step? How do you think this starvation issue, the hunger issue, is going to be resolved?
Well, as I said, I mean, there are a lot of people on the ground, international organizations, UN agencies, our own staff are willing to continue to work if the supplies were allowed to come in as soon as possible. The biggest challenge is the siege enforced by Israel on the border crossings. This is the problem. I think the priority, therefore, is for the international community to pressure Israel, seriously pressure Israel to open the borders and allow food in. There is no need to give excuses. The starvation is evident. Everybody in the world can see that. Your report just showed a lot of pain and a lot of hard feelings and a lot of suffering for our people in Gaza. This is more than clear for everybody who wants to see and listen. So the fact that an Israeli government spokesman wants to say otherwise is just very unfortunate and very sad. The truth is, children are also being allowed to die starving. Journalists are being targeted. Aid workers are being targeted. So this got to end. There's no reason to continue this war. We need first the border crossing to open, aid to come in, United Nations and international organizations be allowed to do their job, a ceasefire to take place, and then Israeli forces to leave Gaza, and then with the support of international partners, the Palestinian Authority is more than willing and able to do the job.
Okay.
So there's no need for additional excuses for staying in Gaza.
Okay, so now about the ceasefire and for all these issues you say, as I said, the President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is in Europe and apparently heading to the Middle East, but apparently Benjamin Netanyahu has withdrawn or recalled his negotiators from Qatar, saying, I don't know what he's saying in terms of the actual status of this, but what about Hamas's position? Are you actually in touch with Hamas at all? Do you give them instructions or just ideas about how to get to a ceasefire? Because they also are holding out. So how is this going to end?
Well, it got to end. I think it's very important for the mediators to be allowed to do their jobs. And I think they're doing a very good job. We appreciate what Qatar and Egypt and, of course, the United States are trying to do. They're doing the right thing. Hamas and Israel needs to cooperate. There's no reason to continue this war. We had already said to Hamas that for the sake of our people, for the interest of our people, for the national interest, we need to move on. We need to end this war. And I think they're doing, from what we understand, they're doing the best they can, being as helpful as they can. If they are not doing that, we invite them to come and do this as soon as possible for the sake of our people. But clearly, the real problem, we believe, is still on the Israeli side.
Okay.
So let's hope that the Israeli side will move on with this.
Okay, so I want to know in general what you think they're trying to achieve, and that's because you're sitting in Ramallah in the West Bank, and there's been a huge amount of settler and IDF violence in the West Bank as well. Israel always says that it's acting against terrorism, Hamas militants in the West Bank. In June last month, Shin Bet targeted 60 operatives, they say there. Are your security forces trying to get control of that situation? Because there's obviously always been and regularly warfare, conflict between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority?
Well, there is no fighting there in West Bank between Hamas and Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority is in charge to the extent they can. The only challenge for the Palestinian Authority today, to be honest with you, is the settlers and the Israeli army that have been, as you know, invading cities in the West Bank almost on a daily basis, especially in the northern part of the West Bank and Palestinian refugee camps in Tul Karam and Jenin and other places. This is the real challenge of our security. We will do our best to keep the place safe. But trust me, the security of the West Bank is probably more secure than many other places in this region. So this is not an excuse for Israel to continue what they are doing in the West Bank. They have been doing everything that undermines the Palestinian Authority in terms of siege of the Palestinian cities, invading cities, settler terrorism, financial siege, preventing workers from going to their work, 1,000 checkpoints within the West Bank, between the cities of the West Bank. This is a well-designed campaign to undermine the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian people. Starvation in Gaza, occupation in the West Bank, settler terrorism in the West Bank, trying to displace everybody is the objective.
Okay.
We will not go anywhere from here. This is our country, and that's where we want to live, and that's where our future lies.
I just need to read this out to you because Special Envoy Witkoff has just posted on X that he too is withdrawing his delegation from Doha for consultations after the latest response from Hamas. They basically accuse Hamas of showing a lack of desire to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. They praise the mediators, but this is this is their point, and it's a longer X, but that's the point. So, you've said that their point, the Israeli far right's mission is to transfer population. I think that's what you said, get people to leave. Today, the far-right finance minister, Smotrich, said that they have approved a huge budget transfer, $270 million, I believe, for investment in transportation infrastructure in the West Bank, saying that this would, quote, implement de facto Israeli sovereignty over the territory. The investment is part of a clear strategic plan strengthening the settlements, physically and politically connecting the area to the state of Israel, and turning sovereignty into a concrete fact on the ground. They've been doing things like that in Gaza. I mean, there's obviously a lot of destruction, but also these ministers have called for transfer of population from one end to the next, camps to put them in, the millions of Gazans. So what is your reaction to this latest Smotrich declaration of total sovereignty over the West Bank?
Well, it's very sad that this is coming from an official in a state of Israel. I think this is irresponsible. I think this is a good message for the international community to hear and listen to the real intentions of the Israeli government. I think this is just another proof of our opposition, that this is an orchestrated campaign against our people, not only in Gaza, but not only in the East Jerusalem, but also in the West Bank. The objective is not just Gaza. The objective is all the Palestinian issue, the Palestinian cause, Palestinian statehood as a project they do want to see happening. But this will not happen. I promise them that our people will stay the course and work very hard with international partners and according to international laws to earn our independence and free our country from this occupation. The whole international community is now united against this continuing occupation and any attempt to displace our people and to continue this war. We have a lot of faith and a lot of expectations from international community to hold this government of Israel accountable and to help Palestinians to earn their independence and end this occupation as soon as possible.
Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa, thank you very much for joining us from Ramallah.